Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin, who's been hobnobbing with the rich and famous. And that's one of the reasons why we did the podcast on Tuesday versus Wednesday of last week, if any of you noticed. But a lot to report there, Dr. Lopkin, a lot of interesting bits of information. I'll just let you take the floor.
Yeah, this was an amazing conference. This was the 10X Growth Conference in Las Vegas that was put on by New York Times bestselling author and real estate investor Grant Cardone. And the lineup of speakers. Now, what makes this conference absolutely amazing, every speaker was a multimillionaire or a billionaire. They were there to discuss how they got where they are. And what was really interesting, okay, now, first of all, this was hardly an exclusive group of attendees that I was in. There were 7,500 people in the venue and another 150,000 attending virtually. So this was not, like a Davos type, setting. This was,
thank God,
multimillionaires and billionaires reaching out to talk to people about how they can improve their situations. And number of very well-known folks were speaking. Some of the business people talking, Jimmy John, founder of the Jimmy John sandwich shop chain.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs.
Love him.
Martha Stewart.
Love her.
Actor Ryan Reynolds. And I was actually really impressed with his talk, which shocked me because I've never been a big fan of his acting. But as a businessman, he was amazing. But also, there was Eric Trump, Alina Habba, who was Trump's attorney, Gary
administration.
Yes, and she's a member of the administration. Gary Cohn, who was the former COO of IBM and Trump's former economic advisor, and Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA. And the two big things that were absolutely standout. First of all, again, with the exception of Eric Trump, every one of these folks started with nothing. They weren't born with silver spoons in mouth. And these folks completely blow away the image of the millionaires and billionaires that Bernie Sanders is trying to put forth. Not only are these folks incredibly successful in business, but Gary Cohn, Alina Habba, they actually had to put all of their success aside so they could join the administration for next to no money compared to what they were making.
Oh, a little bit a mirror image of what happened with the Democrats, right? And it's very interesting that you say that because the Democrats are supposed to be the party of the people, to do the Bernie impression, which is complete BS. But, actually, you can say that a lot of them are basically insatiably greedy. How do you like that? Oprah, she actually needs any more money? I doubt it.
And that's another thing that really stood out at the conference. When Eric Trump spoke, he talked about how he grew up. And of course, he grew up in real estate. But before he was making any decisions, he learned contracting. He was working on Trump properties as a construction worker. He learned to be an electrician. He was working as an electrician. And he actually was joking about that because apparently he still does that from time to time in his own home, and it drives his wife nuts. But he learned the business from the bottom up. There was no silver spoon. Alina Habba was defending rape victims pro bono. You had a venture capitalist there, Bob Duggan, and Dr. I'm probably going to struggle with the pronunciation of her name, but it's Mackie Zanginet. Okay, she was involved in biotech. Now, these two actually worked together to bail out a struggling biotech that actually had an amazing discovery that is now the basis for Lutrita, which is a cancer treatment. If these guys hadn't risked their own money and went in and turned the company around, we would be short treatment for that has helped a lot of people with cancer.
Wait a
You've
second. I thought Biden. Whoa, whoa! I thought Biden was going to cure cancer. What are you
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about?
Apparently not. You also have a couple of folks independently working on education programs, bringing education to underprivileged children. One project was for kids, underprivileged kids here in the United States. Another one was for underprivileged kids overseas, where their own government, it was South American government, I can't remember which country, their own government had actually given up on them, saying they're too stupid to ever learn to read. Well, um these folks went in and actually created educational materials to teach these kids to read and write and help get them out of poverty. Now, yes, this was a business conference, but you could tell it was overwhelmingly MAGA. And I'm saying MAGA, not Republican, because these were people that wanted to make America great again. And Bob Duggan actually said, making America great again is just the first step. We need to make the world great. And he actually used the term, make humanity great. This is the focus of the millionaires and billionaires that Bernie Sanders and AOC want to tear down.
But there is a huge difference. Okay, you talk about the celebrity that you were impressed with. Okay, probably a very smart person. Juxtapose that to George Clooney, a college dropout who thinks he's. And that's the other thing about the Democrats is they talent neutral grandiosity into the extreme. These people are probably just the opposite, I would have to imagine. And there's another difference, Dr. Lockwood, not being at the conference. I'm talking about between Democrats and the now rising MAGA movement is that these people did it themselves, as you said, self-made people, but also did it independently in the private sector. It seems like the Democrats almost entirely get their fortunes and not just little bits of money, fortunes from their public service. Biden, Pocahontas, the list goes on, doesn't it? Even our little Chrissy Murphy, who was a teacher and now he's worth millions. I don't know how that happens, but you can maybe inform me of that.
Yeah,
Your
because
thoughts?
the Democrats view public service as a career, and they don't treat it as public service. They use that as a platform to make them money.
Mm-hmm.
which this is not what our founding fathers had in mind. And in fact, Charlie Kirk talked about this at the conference. Our founding fathers envisioned public service as you would take a few months off from your actual job, go to the Capitol, do your duty to help the country run, and then go back to what you were doing before, not stay in politics and stay in public service for an entire career. This was something you were supposed to do on the side for the good of the country. And certainly you've got political families now, and this is both sides of the aisle, obviously, who've
More on the
turned
Democrats.
who've turned it into a family business
A
instead of public
racketeering
service.
enterprise. A
Yes,
racketeering
case
enterprise.
in the case of the Biden family, that's the only way you can describe it.
Yeah, well, Elizabeth Warren, I mean Pocahontas, the big socialist, he's worth 12 million on $150,000 a year salary. I mean, you're a smart guy. I'm sorry to say, I'm going to throw it out there. I don't think you can do that. Not many people can, but they can. Pelosi, who's pretty much you said she's intelligent. I disagree with that, and she probably has a drinking problem at this point. But I see a difference in ideology. They actually look down on private enterprise and they're enamored with big government. Look what's going
Oh,
on with Doge.
absolutely. They want big government because that's where they get their kickbacks from.
That's the trough.
And the fact of the matter is, this group of business people that addressed the conference have done more for America than the entire Democratic Party has done over the past 30 years. They were talking about who they work with. And this was also very important. It was a big focus of almost every one of their talks, is that none of them claimed they did this on their own. They all partnered with people. They worked with people. But it was the people they worked with that stood out. Eric Trump talked about one of the managers of their Las Vegas hotel. This is someone that never went to college, that originally joined the Trump, not administration, the Trump company as a driver, learned the business, and worked his way up. And Jimmy Jones was the same thing. No college education, learned the business by doing it, and worked his way to become a billionaire. And
Charlie
it
Kirk
blows.
is not a college graduate either.
No, he's not.
Seems to
And
be a common trend, doesn't it?
this also goes to talk about what we've mentioned on a lot of podcasts, how the value of a college education has been completely overblown.
Blown up.
So yeah, I mean,
Yes, I
this was
told you. Yes, I told you about a video I saw real quick that had college graduate going into an interview in 1950 and people jumping,
yes.
backwards. Oh my God! Now it's like they're smoking a cigarette, going, "All right, check box number 90." It's like okay, whatever. So yeah, very interesting. And I actually think, as an aside, that talking about the whole college thing is I don't think people, and I love your opinion, I'm sure our listeners would as well. I don't think people are as enamored with the whole college shtick. Remember, like you go to a cocktail party. Where'd you go to school? I don't think it holds the same weight.
No, no, it doesn't. You never hear that. Where did you go to school? Except for in certain industries, they still do that, and that's a holdover. And that's actually something that Alina Habba was talking about, because she obviously she went to college and to law school, but she did not go to an Ivy League college. So a lot of her colleagues looked down on her because she was not a Harvard graduate. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, she was kicking their asses.
Yeah, I think that happens in business too. But it is really interesting. You look at that lineup, and of course, I have to admit, obviously, I am biased. But then you look at the Democratic Party. I mean, AOC, Crockett, Bernie. I mean, it just there's just nothing there. I mean, am I just delusional? I don't see it. No
No,
original thought, no new ideas, just pissing on what they don't like. And I think that's one of the reasons why Gen Z is leaning conservative slash MAGA.
yeah, no,
There's
you're not.
no, it's a, let me just say one thing. It's being older than you, and this is kind of almost before my time, is you had all these baby boomers enamored with Kennedy. I think the same thing's happening, different, completely different scenario. But I think the new vision, the new, um, the new aspiration is on the MAGA side, not the old 70s plus or insane AOC side of the Democratic Party. I think if
Yeah,
you're young, you're looking at MAGA if
yeah,
you have a brain.
you're absolutely right, and a lot of the recent polls have shown that. One more thing about the conference before we move on. If anybody is actually interested in seeing clips from the conference, go to Instagram and follow Grant Cardone because he is posting video clips of these interviews, and you'll see exactly what I've been talking about.
Very interesting. We also have our own problems with the Democratic Party right here in this beautiful bastion of liberalism, Connecticut, don't we? In beautiful Bridgeport by the
We
sea.
We do 150 indictments for election fraud. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Trump was saying that the 2020 election was fraudulent, didn't the Democrats swear up and down that there was no election fraud?
Of course, it never happened. It's as pure as the driven snow
A
in March.
hundred, yeah, 150 indictments against Democrats for election fraud. And now the Connecticut Republican Party has approached Pam Bondi to do a wider investigation to see how far this corruption goes.
Could it be with Danang Dick, meaning Blumenthal, our proud a veteran of Vietnam service, or maybe Chrissy, the adultering
Look,
Murphy?
it
You
wouldn't
never know.
it wouldn't surprise me for Richard Blumenthal to be involved. However, there does seem to be a focus on Chris Murphy. It pretty much seems that he is involved in this, and we'll see what the investigation turns up.
Oh, Chrissy looks like he's been a little tarnished, having an affair with a liberal news reporter, abandoning his wife, as he did his house several years ago. And I think that might do him in, the little Bridgeport fiasco.
Uh,
Or it might
It,
rise him through the ranks even more, given the Democratic Party. Who knows? I don't know. What the hell knows? With the Democratic Party, all bets are off. Do you agree?
yeah, I mean, you've heard the critiques of Doge. The Democrats keep using the phrase that yes,
Oligarchs.
well, oligarchs also, but they keep saying yes, they're in favor of getting rid of waste and fraud, but you need to do it with a scalpel, not a hacksaw. Now, the reason they want to use a scalpel is because they want to leave the structures in place so that once they return to power, they can put the waste and fraud back in.
100%, and they're also scared shitless that where these money trails lead, and it's very scary. Again, tarnishing. And we look at even CNN had a poll that the majority of people believe, and CNN say overwhelming. That's not me. And it's you think it'd be higher if it's overwhelming. It was like 45%, but the second highest since '09. That people believe the country's going in the right direction, which is a complete, almost mirror image of under Uncle Joe. So, and also you look at, we already talked about Gen Z's uh, leaning towards MAGA. Um, Anything can happen, but at this point, I'd have to say the Democratic Party is broken right now. Anything can happen. I get it, and you never count your chickens before they're hatched, especially with the the bird flu. But anyway, Would you assess the same thing that they're in a world of hurt when Chrissy Murphy and AOC and Crockett are your flag bearers? That's a problem.
Yeah, they do.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, they don't seem to understand that that was why they lost the 2024 elections, because they were going too far to the left. And now they're doubling down, and it's not going to end well for them if they can't pull back. And that same CNN poll that had, 45% of the country thinks we're going in the right direction finally, also had only 27% of the country had a favorable view of the Democrats. And what I found really amusing about that is that a Fox News poll, everybody says, oh, well, Fox News swings to that. The Fox News poll done at the same time gave the Democrats a 31% positive rating. So the
And that's across both Democrats and Republicans, correct? So to put
yes,
that in perspective, that means probably only 40% of Democrats might have a positive, or 35, close to 40% would have a positive impression of their
well,
own
no,
party
I think it has to be lower than that because
because of
CNN
independence.
swings. Well, yeah, CNN swings very far to the left. So most of the people they poll are going to be Democrats and independents. And they got the lower rating.
Yeah, very interesting. So I think they need some real. You talk about the scalpel or hammer. The Democratic Party needs a hammer. I don't think, and this is not just wishful thinking, Dr. Eric Lopkin. I don't think they can help themselves. I think they're drifting more towards the left. AOC, Bernie had the self-hating Jew having like rallies. I think they're until the midterms. If the midterms blow up, then I think AOC and that crowd will be excommunicated. What do you think of that analysis? Only until then.
Yeah, I think they're going to be in the weeds until we see what happens with the midterm. I think one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to have the left completely blow up and the Democrats will say, all right, that's it. We've gone too far. We need to regroup the same way they did after Jimmy Carter. Now, they're not going to do that until after the midterms. But I see
Mm-hmm.
that as a possibility. Although, again, at this point, any leadership they might have is going to have to come from left field. There is no national figure that is capable of doing this. The other possibility is that the left permanently takes over the Democratic Party and the centrist Democrats leave the party, either become Republicans or possibly form a more centrist third party, which could mark the end of the Democratic Party.
I think that is a well thought out analysis and not beyond the pale. How do you like that? But you also have something I want your analysis on. You had the the chat leak, if you will, and I always thought, okay, not a good thing, but not the. Why am I saying this? Because you have Joaquin Jeffries. He basically portraying it as the most outlandish, anti patriotic, dangerous thing since the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's not even close.
No,
What is the point? Is they always overreach, and I think you get to a point where you've cried wolf too much.
well, they don't even
It's
have
a
any
nice, like it's a
credibility on
bullshit issue.
Yeah, they don't
Go
even
ahead.
have any credibility on this because they're all up in arms. But when you take a look at the operation that went forward, it was a complete success, no American
That's what I'm
casualties,
saying. Yeah,
and
it's nothing.
everything worked. Meanwhile, these same Democrats were absolutely silent with the botched withdrawal of Afghanistan that cost American lives.
Great analysis, 100%, and that's why they basically, if it was for not for no credibility, credibility wouldn't even be there in their diction. I mean, nothing happened. It's a slap on the wrist kind of a thing, and just save your gunpowder for when you really have an issue. I'm not going to try to advise them, but I would if that's what I would say. And it's really interesting that same chat leak, if you will, the judge that put the kibosh on sending criminals to back to where they came from is now been appointed or has been given a nod by a Americans for Oversight, which is obviously a Soros front organization. But kind of interesting. You always talk about the deep state. Just coincidence, I'm sure.
Yeah, never mind the fact that this judge has family members that work
Yes.
at NGOs trying to work with illegal immigrants. So, the fact that the judge was even allowed to hear the original case was beyond, belief. But American Oversight, as far as I can tell, this is a nonprofit government watchdog group. This is how they
Mm-hmm.
describe themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They actually don't have any standing to file a lawsuit against this. They're claiming that federal records laws were
Did
violated.
they ever
Well,
look in Biden's garage?
yeah, right. But the fact of the matter is, there was no difference, except for the technology involved, between having a conversation on Signal and having a conversation in a skiff. The same laws should apply, which means there's nothing was violated. Now, I'm sure that the judge is going to rule against the administration because that's what this judge does. But as we were talking about before the podcast in our prep, so far, and there have been so many legal challenges, the ones that have made it to the Supreme Court, and they all eventually will, because neither side is going to let it go until it gets that far. But all of the cases that have gotten to the Supreme Court have been decided in favor of the administration.
Yes, I would be if it doesn't. I don't know how you have a country if everything. And by the way, isn't it kind of this coincidence that over the last 100 years, all lower court uh, um, interference, negating executive action, 92% have gone against Trump over the last 100 years. I'm sure that's just coincidence, isn't it?
Trump has actually had more of his decisions challenged in court in the last 2 months than all the other presidents in the 20th century combined.
There you go. It's called judge shopping, and it's really funny because Newt Gingrich, or interesting, I should say, Newt Gingrich said that they've lost everything else, the Democrats, and this is their last bastion. But reflecting back on what you said about Reagan, that's what they did when they lost. They were on the outs. They were in the woods under Reagan, okay, and Gingrich. But what they did is they looked at local governments. They looked at the school boards and worked their magic there. So the virus is never totally eradicated. One thing which I would like to be eradicated is NPR. Why, for the life of me, are we funding a wing of a communications wing of the Democratic Party? So it was really interesting. I think it was today that Catherine Marr, one of the two leaders of the NPR organization, uh, basically was grilled, and her text came out calling Trump like a psychopath and blah blah blah. Pull the funding immediately from this shit organization. It lost any. It used to actually be somewhat listenable, and it used to years ago. It was people used to goof. They called it National Palestine Radio
Yes.
because everything was anti-Israeli. Now it's anti-Trump and anti-American. Pull the plug. You can't pull it quick enough. They have plenty of money. They have fundraising. They have licensing. Pull the plug
Well,
immediately.
they actually don't have plenty of money.
Oh, too bad.
This has just been coming out because the general public has stopped supporting PBS and NPR. And
Oh, shucks.
in fact, Sesame Workshop may have to close down. These are the
Oh,
folks behind Sesame Street because over the past 20 years or so, maybe a little longer, I'm not 100% sure the time frame, they stopped teaching reading and math on the show
oh, shocking. Come on, stop it.
and kept focusing on people's feelings and inclusiveness.
No.
And this is why 6 years ago they had to cut a deal with HBO. HBO paid them a lot of money to get the first run episodes on HBO, specifically the Max streaming service, and then 6 months later it would air on PBS. Well, HBO has canceled that contract. They are no longer doing this. So Sesame Workshop is suddenly out in the fields, and PBS, NPR. The basic problem is they haven't had any credibility since the Reagan administration. And the reason for this is because this was one of Reagan's big mistakes. He did this with great intentions, but did not take into account the unforeseen consequences. NPR and PBS were bound, as the other broadcasters were, by the fairness doctrine from the FCC. They were required by rule to cover both sides of an issue.
But they don't.
Reagan got rid the Reagan FCC got rid of the fairness doctrine because it was actually squelching coverage of certain issues, because the broadcaster said, well, if we have to cover both sides, we're not going to cover it at all. So he thought the Reagan FCC, and I don't remember who the commissioner was that came up with this, said, well, if they're not covering it all, at least if we say you can, you just have to cover it, you don't have to cover it balanced, they would at least get coverage. Well, that backfired big time and led to the current echo chamber system that we have now.
I also think it's interesting, though, it's a bigger issue. I know nothing about this Catherine Marr, but I would bet dollars to donuts that she's an Ivy League entitled little brat, okay? And again, we talked about the value of Ivy League or college in general. How smart is this intelligentsia genius, okay? Ruin it. How do you ruin Sesame Street? I mean, you have to try to do that. It was a simple formula. They just can't help themselves. So I love it when elitists go down the shitter, and I hope she does, and I hope NPR does. And speaking of going down the shitter, we have Snow White, another enterprise that you have to try to screw up. Well, it bombed. I think it did 45 million, and so did Hector the Spotted Cat did 22 million.
It did just under 43 million, which was the worst showing of a Disney live action remake to date. Prior to this, the worst showing was Dumbo, and even Dumbo beat this. But the question is, I mean, DEI is so ingrained in Disney, they knew this was going to be a failure and didn't back away from the project. And I don't remember who it was that I heard, but somebody was talking about the telltale signs of how they knew, aside from all the bad reviews and bad press coverage. Every Disney movie, especially, particularly the ones geared at kids, has had a massive merchandising effort. Dolls, toys, Happy Meals, all that. This had nothing. Someone that worked at a movie theater said, usually when Disney has a big release, there's stand-ups that they put up in the theaters. There's all sorts of promotional items. Nothing. Dead silence from Disney. They knew it was going to fail. And quite frankly, they should have just shelved the project, taken the loss as a tax write
Yep.
off, and done
Take it
away
as a
with
team.
it.
But it's the same thing as it's a microcosm of the Democratic Party, and it's the same thing like a drug addict or an alcoholic. You can't help yourself. You know it's bad. You just can't stop it. Again, and I love all these geniuses and entitled people. Basically, maybe it's the echo chamber that just reinforces their stupid ideas, because you could get a non-college grad, just common sense person, and I think, hey, go run Sesame Street. They go, yeah, okay, no problem. But not Catherine. Nope, not Catherine Marr. Nope, she wants to have how you feel. And she never really looked into the facts since 1970. It was all about enjoying education and educating young people. But I don't know, kind of didn't quite get that one.
What's really sad about it is if you take a look at the trends, the generation, my generation, because Sesame Street debuted in 1969. It literally debuted 2 weeks after I was born. So I was the first generation to grow up on Sesame Street. And this was the last time that our educational grades actually went up. And after that, you had the Department of Education come in the 70s.
78.
You had Sesame Street go to, oh, we have to talk about tolerance and feelings. and all of a sudden, all of our results started dropping. We went from number 1 to number 29. And, as you and I have said,
29 is 0. Let's cut the shit. 29 is 0.
You and I have said this over and over again. It all goes back to Casey Stengel. How do you lose that badly? It was a team effort.
I would agree. Well, this is a team effort. Carnivore Bites. We're on a roll, unlike NPR, and our listeners can contribute to the show, can't they?
They can. Go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. Message us. Let us know what you're thinking, and what are your opinions about what's going on in America. And if there's something you want us to take a look at, let us know. You can do the same thing at xvadio.com/connect. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
I thank you, Dr. Lopian. Always a pleasure, always informative, and I'll see you next week.
We'll see you then.